Welcome to the podcast. Sten Morgan here, Andy Traub. Today we are going to dive deep into expectations. I find this is true of life, and we're going to try to avoid as many random tangents.
No, we're not. Lean into them. Go deep.
And this is not a counseling session, but expectations are so vital. And I find that whenever I lose sight of it, or I kind of slip into busyness or just kind of doing what's working just well enough, whenever a situation arises, clients confused, they misinterpreted something. When I reflect on that, the root of it was always there was a lack of communication and expectation wasn't set.
Yeah. Expectations are everything. And so we want to teach you today on a really practical level, how do you set great expectations without doing all the work? You'll do it eventually in context of a proposal. There's so many different parts of this that I think it's easy to skip over. Like, oh, you give them a proposal in it. So, but what should you include in a proposal? What is the real goal of a proposal in the system that we teach? And what have we seen work for hundreds of advisors who go from I've never done this to now I'm doing it, I'm making six figures. Like, but what is that actual intersection of this is what I'm going to put in front of them? Because I think what's great about the way you teach this then is it's a lot of stuff that you can exclude. And it's a lot of freedom when you say, if you just include these four things,
yeah,
that's all you need.
What's helpful for me is I think about when I entered the business, what most of the industry is doing is what is that baseline? And then what are we trying to teach? Or how are what I would call the advisor of the future, what does that practice look like? And so the baseline, as you listen, there's a good chance that you did this in the past, or you may still be doing it, that when you meet with a client, you talk about their current needs, you do a fact finder, and then the solution is the product.
Yep.
Let's roll over your assets. Let's buy this insurance policy. There's a good chance, and I want to challenge this in you, hopefully it makes you a little uncomfortable, that you are not setting an expectation of an engagement at all. Like that the only thing we're giving the client is you have a problem, I have a product, and they're like, I guess he's my advisor. I guess she's available if I call her every once in a while. But most advisors, we coach hundreds of them, very successful advisors to new advisors. I have yet to experience an advisor that I feel like sets the stage so well from the very beginning of, hey, here's how we get compensated. Hey, here's how often we're going to engage. Because if you do that so well from the very beginning, the client's going to be like, oh, not only are you giving me what you said you would, but you're also exceeding expectations. And so my challenge is that probably everybody listening right now, and this is the process we're going through with my practice, needs to revamp the expectations they set with somebody of what does it even look like to have an advisor? Hey, just so you know, here's how my practice works. Here's how often we're going to interact together. Hey, when you have a need, we're either going to fill it or we actually don't sell any products at all. They need to clearly understand who you are and how your practice operates, how often they're going to be in touch with you. Because most of the time when I meet new clients, I'm not getting a lot of praise about past advisors. It's usually they didn't call me enough. Yeah. I never really understood it. I don't think I had a financial plan. And when we sit with advisors and talk to them, there's like this frustration of like, of course they had a financial plan. Oh, I was doing that. If that is true, the only disconnect was your ability to communicate it and set good expectations.
So let's go into what a good proposal actually does. Mm-hmm. And some of this is more nuanced, right? Where there is, for instance, it builds confidence. It is simple, things like that. So what are some of the things that a great proposal will do with as few words and pages as possible?
The components, and this was a challenge for me, and part of the proposal is the thing we're talking about really today that's really practical. And my hope is that everybody listening audits their proposal. You either don't have one and need one, or you say, man, I've been using the same one for a long time. I need to revamp it. Is that I caught myself having a proposal and I skipped like 3 pages.
Yeah.
And so I'd say, well, why do I even have those pages in it? And so it was kind of a going back and saying, okay, every page in the proposal is going to be so purposeful with the ultimate goal of being that if I walk them through this, I've covered most of my bases. Yeah. I've set really clear expectations, and we'll walk through some specifics of that.
I'm remembering too, just as a consumer, being at meetings where I'm signing lots of documents and like, let's skip these 3 pages. And I'm like, wait a minute, but I'm signing these pages. Yeah. You know what I mean? It seems like they should either be in here and they're important. You should talk me through them, or let's not have them. Yeah. It doesn't It doesn't create more confidence and clarity when you're just we have to have these pages. So it's like, oh, that's disconcerting,
Yeah.
right? So let's talk about what it has to have.
Yeah, but part of that this started was a good buddy of mine who's in marketing would became a client, and he saw our office, the experience, everything around it, and then he saw the proposal, and he was just like, dude, this thing just falls off a cliff. Like, I appreciate everything so far, the communication, the strategies you're showing me, but then you put this thing in front of me has bad formatting. Like, it just feels like this dry, boring document.
It didn't quite have like Comic Sans using that font. It's really bad. Anyway, it wasn't quite that bad, but it was still just, it didn't create the same experience. Like, it's when I go buy something in certain stores, like even the checkout is like an experience. You know what I mean? Like even the checkout page or you know what I mean? Like, so it should all speak to excellence in being an elite advisor.
Yeah, and I think from beginning to end, and for the call out in that moment was like, this just feels out of place in everything else you're trying to do. And so part of it is the content, which we'll talk about, like what we were trying to accomplish. But to his point, he's a marketing mind. He was like, it also looks terrible. And spend some time formatting it. Pay somebody $100 to go through and clean this thing up. And so as far as the look and feel, I'd say make sure it's on branding. Do that. Today, we're going to talk more about the content that helps you communicate expectations. That a good proposal will force you to go through each page so that even if you're rushed or you get lazy, it protects you from yourself.
Yeah.
So walking through each kind of step of the proposal, obvious one for us, title page, it's simple. It's, even the expectation of you don't just jump right into it. That ours will say something like financial consulting proposal with the client's name or financial planning proposal. So that's page one. The next one is what we use as areas of focus. We have our own internal system, and we share this with our community members. We give them our proposal. It's editable if they want it. But we say, here are the 6 to 7 categories we're going to cover within your financial plan. What I used to do is I'd tell them exactly what I thought I was going to do.
Exact strategies, you mean?
Yeah, I'd list some strategies, or I'd say, hey, we're going to redesign your 401k plan, or hey, we're going to dive into cost segregation and unpack that. And I try to get really granular because a part of me was like, man, look how impressive this is, all this list of things we're going to be doing.
Okay. What's wrong with that?
What that opened up was, one, the client would say, well, I don't want that and that, so would you change your fee?
I've heard this from advisors. I mean, the last month I talked to 20 advisors, interviewed them extensively about proposals for just some internal stuff we're doing for part of EAN. And one of them was a few advisors experienced people, because they gave them sort of a specific menu. They're sort of like, I want to replace the fries with onion rings kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, is it less if I don't have that? Like, they would start to treat it like a menu.
Yeah.
Right. Which is a problem when those things are all supposed to connect.
And what that tells me, because I got that feedback also, is that somehow there was a miss in communication that they got to pick and choose. And it was, one, because I didn't set the stage well, but two, the way I listed it almost made it feel kind of like
if you could check a box, you can uncheck a box, right?
And what I'm realizing is that they don't even know what they need yet. Like, if I give them options, their desire to just pay less, one, means they don't see the value yet. They maybe haven't experienced what we're about to deliver to them, but really what they're paying for is us. It's the system we built. It's the knowledge we have. It's the other experts we're going to lean into. So the great expectation setting for the categories you're covering is more or less, we're going to dive into each one of these categories in detail. We may find out in your situation that a few of these are in good shape, but there's always some we have to dive a lot deeper into. And the engagement you're saying is this process. It's not a specific idea. We're going to, in strategy meetings like we coach, you're going to dive deep into this proposal and you're going to give them examples of strategies that could fall into each category, but you're not going to hang your hat. And this is where you get in trouble sometimes. If I say, we're going to redesign your 401k plan, they'd sign on, and all of a sudden you find out that the other partner in the business doesn't want to do it. And in the client's mind, they're like, oh, but I paid you mainly for this thing. And you're like, no, but there's all this other stuff we can do. And you're feeling yourself in this moment. And again, the root of that was you didn't set great expectations up front. So categories page, that's kind of how we approach it, is less, hey, here's some examples in a meeting. But when you see the proposal, we're going to tell you, you're going to get a robust, deep dive in all these areas. And then we go to timeline. I want a client to know upfront, like, how long is this thing going to last? For most advisors, and I did this for years, is like, hey, I'm your advisor now forever.
Right.
I sold you something that I got paid a commission on the front end, or sold you an insurance policy, but the industry says portrays so much value give them this open-ended, I'm your person in order to make the sale.
Yeah.
And now you are stuck. And as
Well,
advisor,
I would say a word is you're beholden to them. You're indebted to them. And what that creates, again, it's about expectations. In our experience, again, we're talking with hundreds of advisors, it just creates resentment. You're mad that someone paid you 3 years ago and is calling you 3 years later with a question about money. And it's like, I tell people, like, man, these people just keep emailing me. I'm like, do you email them back? Yeah. That sounds like it's your fault. Like, stop emailing them back. That's why they keep emailing you. Like, you know, so yes, I love the idea of the timeline. And here's the expectation of how long it's going to take. And I think the biggest thing you do with the timeline, and this has been pretty revolutionary as we talked to a lot of advisors, is that some companies have like a contractual, it has to be a 12-month term. But even within that 12-month term, like, what does it look like for the first 3 months or the first 3 weeks or the first 6 months? Like, set the expectation. And it's been amazing to see advisors go, I can do that.
Okay.
And not in a way you're taking advantage of the client, but just setting the expectation like, yeah, it's going to be kind of crazy for 2 months. And then I'm just going to update you every month for that. And like, you can do that. Yeah. Cause that's the reality of planning for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, compliance, and this is kind of the head trash we're dealing with advisors and, you know, ones that sit in that tension and kind of finally break out of like, okay, wow, I've been doing it a certain way, not because someone told me, but because somehow I just perceived that.
Yeah.
There are compliance boxes we have to check. Like your file needs to show I delivered this. Yeah. Here's what I told them I was going to do. Yeah. Like, we're all for that. That is not the same thing as what you put in front of a client to communicate expectations to them. So part of this process is I want you, as you listen, to break apart the onboarding document experience, which is the compliance department requirement, from the communication that you're giving to a client of what you are going to deliver to them. Because as advisors, what we all do is we all get to set our own service model. Mm-hmm. And I've worked with so many firms. You know, I was at big wirehouse firms. I was at insurance broker dealers. And when I went to work there, nobody said, hey, Sten, you have to meet with your clients once a month. No one said, hey, Sten, you have to meet with them once a year. There was the very basic level, but all advisors got to kind of make it up from there. And every advisor was saying, in order to keep my book of business and attract more clients, here's the service model I think is appropriate.
Yeah.
So if any part of you is like, Sten, we're not allowed to do this. No, you're going to have requirements on what you have to deliver and how you have to deliver it. But that's different from the client experience expectation you want to set with your clients. And so what I have is I have a 3-month timeline that I show clients. And it's, hey, it's going to be really intense for 3 months. We're going to build your financial plan and we're going to deliver the action plan to you. And then 6 months after that, we're going to do a check-in call. But all they know is like, oh, it's really intense for 3 months. And then I'm going to talk to them in 6 months. Mm-hmm. We can exceed that expectation if they have an extra question. But like I've clearly put in writing, it's also formatted so it looks like a timeline. Like, oh, thank you for telling me what this to expect.
Yeah.
We also have 12-month engagements, and that timeline looks different. Those clients could pay me the same amount of money. Those clients' compliance files could look pretty similar, but to them, the experience is totally different because the annual one is getting 4 meetings that year. Mm-hmm. I say, we're going to have quarterly strategy meetings, and here's what we're going to do. For them, they might be like, oh, my plan is totally different because upfront, I clearly told them it looks like this instead of it looking like this.
I think one of the other ways you can look at this in other industries, and again, look at industries that are successful. I think about the car buying experience. I don't expect to go into a car buying experience and say, you know, hi, Mary, nice to meet you. Hey, Mr. Traub, what are you looking for? I'm looking for my 7th minivan in a row, right? Only funny because it's true. And I go, great. And we sit down and start doing paperwork. No, you know, like let's talk about the payment terms. Like, no, she's going to want to take me around a lot and show me different. She wants me to experience it on a higher level. And then when we need to make the actual decision, yes, there's some paperwork involved. And I just think as so many advisors we see, it's just like they're just ready with the checklist or they're ready with sort of this larger report. And there's a time for that. Like at some point you do need to sign on the dotted line, literally. Yeah. But for most of the experience, it's more of a showroom feeler where it's like, we're not going to actually do everything. I'm not going to like give you the car, but I can take you on a test drive of what it feels like to be in the car with me. And that would be a strategy session, right? And a higher level. And then you get into, you know, generally how much does it cost? And you can go into terms after that. Mm-hmm. But it's permission to stay high level to get them to feel like, yes, I'm a part of a process instead of let's just sit down and make it all about numbers. And again, I think that there's something really practical that you teach, Sten, which is literally, if you're sitting down too much, that's a problem. Yeah. Like part of this planning process is that you are at the whiteboard, you are creating a strategy session versus just another meeting. So I just remember that as you're doing this proposal, that when you start talking about the timeline, that it's going to make them feel like, okay, I'm part of a process. I'm not just going to buy an individual solution. But also, the best thing about this process timeline is it has an end.
That's right. And so far, to recap, we've covered 3 pages: cover page, list of kind of categories that our plan dives deep into without overcommitting to one specific thing, and then a visually appealing timeline that shows them, here's what we're doing for the first 2 weeks, here's the next 4 weeks, as clear as possible, setting that expectation. The next page I included because I wanted to encompass what are some other potential areas that I do not set very clear expectations or that problems have arisen in the past.
Yeah.
And so I call this the mutual commitment page. I want to pause on this page when I'm with a prospect, and I want to talk to them about clarity, confidentiality, creativity, and communication. And this stuff is available on our Circle community. If you haven't signed up for that, jump in there because we'll post a bunch of this content. But I just sit there and I say, okay, here's what we feel about confidentiality. Do you agree? Great. Here's when it comes to communication. If I ask you for something in order to do my job well, you are agreeing to send that thing to me. Because we're really strict with our 3-month and 12-month engagements now. When I first started doing financial planning for a fee, I would say, hey, let's try to do this in 3 months. They wouldn't respond. And I would delay the engagement and it would turn into like 6 months because I just wanted it to be complete.
Yeah.
Now, when we get to 3 months, I'm saying I'm delivering the plan with everything I have. But if you never sent me your 401k formation document for me to deeper dive on that,
right,
you don't get me for an extra 3 months because I told you it was a 3-month engagement. But up front, as a client, if you say yes to us, you're going to communicate really clear with us. So whatever your mutual commitment page would look like, it's you and the prospective client agreeing to foundational things that is going to help them avoid confusion, but it's also going to help you run a tighter, more efficient business.
And I love the way you came to the mutual commitment page, which is basically, what's all the things that frustrates me about the things that I didn't do well or that people try to do to take advantage of the situation and just not have clear boundaries. Like, hey, your last person might have done that, but that's not how we roll.
Yeah.
And so, but it's your job to set the expectation. So the mutual commitment page is, I'm making a promise to you. And so you can show your team, here's what we're committing to.
Yep.
And then for them to say, here's what you're going to do within the context of this commitment. And I think people really appreciate that because people generally don't know what they're supposed to do in the context of a financial plan. They don't know. So you have to tell them. Yep. It's a service to do that. What's on the last page?
Last page is what's the investment to work with us. So here's a high level summary, and you could kind of, I had a proposal once. This was kind of tucked on the final page at the very bottom. Now we give it a whole page.
Yeah.
Because I want to be very clear. Here's the total investment to work with us. That's not like, I don't call it a fee or a cost or an expense. It's an investment in themselves. And then, for us, it's a certain percentage up front, a certain percent on delivery, and we're really clear about that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting how prominent you've made it, because I do find that it's sort of like, hey, let's do work together, and then here's how much it is. Like you like at the very end, you're like, it's going to be $7,000.
That's right.
But it's like, no, and you can give more than one investment option based upon the level of service.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that it's prominent, because to me, that's like, they put big prices on cars, they put big prices on houses. Houses starting at $750 or whatever. Like don't be shy about how much the investment is, because it should be a deal compared to the results that you are saying. Hey, here's what's going to happen. If you give me $8,000, here's what you can expect to happen. So don't hide that it's $8,000.
Yeah, and I don't go as far as like, I don't put it on my website. I don't say, here's the cost to work with us, because I want some context around the experience and the value we can add before I put it in front of them.
Yeah.
But I also don't hide it. And so if you feel uncomfortable with the fee you're proposing, I'd say, okay, what is your process leading up to it that gives you those nervous feelings? Because when we do our training, our live events, advisors come saying, I'll charge $1,500 for a plan. Yeah. And they leave saying like, oh, I'll charge $9,000 for a plan. And so it's your ability to communicate it, but also just feel confident about who you are and what you're delivering. And if you're doing it well, when you get to the investment page, it's it'd be great. If you were ready to do this, this is really valuable. Do you have any questions?
And what you want is, you want people to have that. I think about all the people that, paid for the Cybertruck. You're just like, it's going to look something like that, but I just can't wait. Like, please take they're like, please take my money. You know what I mean? Because they want the experience of whatever they're purchasing. And I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility for people to have that same feeling about a financial plan. There's services that I pay for. There's restaurants that I go to that I'm like, I just cannot wait to give them my money, because I know what I get back is going to be just a great experience.
Yeah.
And that could be something that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could be something that's $20, right?
So I think that the practical takeaway, there's a bigger challenge here about expectations within your business, with your team members. This should be something that, I don't know if it's something you just become naturally great at, or you just need to have systems around you that help remind you of, with KPIs on a weekly basis for team members, when it's onboarding a client. You can avoid so much frustration, confusion, conflict if you just get on the same page with somebody up front. Because if they say, great, thanks for explaining that, I don't appreciate that. Well, okay, you're not going to change your business to get a client that doesn't want to be part of your system.
Yeah.
But it's better to know that up front than not. And so many clients could be great clients, but you're leaving openings for frustration or confusion by not doing this process well. So step one, audit your proposal and challenge yourself to say that your proposal can be different from your onboarding paperwork.
Yeah.
And we'll make compliance happy, but set that aside. You'll get to that. But show them the experience. Get on the same page with them. Make it look aesthetically pleasing. Make it match your brand, because you were telling them a story and welcoming them into a process. And then when they say yes and they're excited, oh, by the way, here's a couple forms to sign. Be willing to split those things up.
And in a future episode, we're going to be talking about sort of the order of when you would present a proposal. Some people present it earlier, some people present it later. But I also think that it's a very common question we get from advisors on our community and people who email the show is, what is your meeting rhythm?
Yeah.
How many, because I mean, the worst case scenario, Stan, we'll wrap with this, but like the worst case scenario for an advisor is that they have, 4 meetings or something, and then they don't. I mean, what's a really average way that an advisor who's just desperate for business is going to give a client that's going to take a long time, or
as much as it takes, which for some clients is forever because they never do anything. But I mean, we have a saying that's have 3 and set them free.
Right.
We'll challenge you to make those 3 touch points really high quality. But if you have 3 meaningful connections with somebody and they do not take action, either they're not ready or a good fit, or you didn't do a great job, but your business cannot afford to have these open-ended, forever going conversations.
Right.
Because there's somebody that you may not know lives down the street from you that is ready to go now.
Mm-hmm.
And will say yes today. And I spent a lot of years chasing maybes, and every once in a while one would hit. It's like the one golf shot that lands, and you're like, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, you shot 134.
Yes.
But enough about me, folks. Why is that so funny?
That one shot was great.
One shot, yeah.
So please take this as a challenge to be a better communicator, and realize that setting expectations in the world of sales and managing people's money needs to be a superpower.
Absolutely. Stan, thanks for breaking that down and making it simple. And I think that the challenge is, how much can you remove and still have it be really, really clear? Mm-hmm. And what we find is things that are, simplified, that it's just easier to say yes. It's easier to consume. It's easier to understand. Mm-hmm. And so that's the challenge, that as advisors, sometimes they just know too much. They make things too complex. And so I think that's the benefit of our episode today, is saying, hey, if you can make this really simple and easy to understand, it's still effective. It's still worth it times 10, but that's how you're going to separate yourself from other advisors.
Yeah, I think a proposal, I don't think should be 1 page. It also doesn't need to be 20. I don't think a financial plan, the deliverable of all your time and expertise, should be on 1 page, but it also doesn't need to be 80. And so let's find this sweet spot of simplicity as a gift, but also the things we're talking about I think, require a little more communication so somebody understands it.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, bud.